Hey, good to see you. Thanks for coming. This is another episode of Wireframe brought to you by Design Systems House. I'm your host, Diane DiDamato, and today we're going to be talking about pimping my type. And to do that, which you could probably guess who we're going to be speaking with today based on that title, we're going to be talking with Oliver from Pimp My Type. Oliver, thank you so much for joining me here today on Wireframe to talk about typography and design systems and all that stuff. How are you doing today?
Hey, Danny, I'm super Donny. Come on, first word, and I'm wrong. So I'm tripping up.
I know, it's the name problem for us for sure. Because I wasn't about to go ahead and figure out your last name for this. Just because
all good.
Yeah,
that's fair. But you can do one now. So
yeah, that's right.
But the problem was actually typography in that sense, because I was glimpsing at the corner of the screen, trying to familiarize myself again. Was it Danny or Donny? And then color contrast.
Color contrast. Imagine that. Imagine that. Goodness gracious. Yeah, so I have Oliver here today, and just as a little bit of a story, how we kind of got connected a little bit, is I wrote a couple of blog posts about typography that it was around design systems and related stuff like that. You probably have seen it on the blog. A couple of things that are very dynamic when it comes to typography. Basically, not being, traditionally we kind of like set numbers and forget it, and we'll have scales and all that stuff. Yeah. But there's something really interesting about having this dynamic part where you just kind of set a font size, you type out a word for a line length, and just things just magically happen. So I did some experimentations on that. I actually did a a presentation about a month ago about this, and I even did it on Wireframe too. But then Oliver reached out and was like, "Oh my God, you solved the problem, but you did it wrong." And I'm being a little facetious there, obviously, but but he actually sent me a great message about solving that particular problem. But he had some opinions about the ways to do it, and I absolutely wanted to talk to Oliver about it. I said, "Why don't you come on the show to talk about it?" So let's talk about it.
Sure.
What is it? Was the line length I think thing, right? Yes. What about it?
So maybe we circle back a bit.
Yeah.
So because I want to get this in context, and I gotta do some, let's say, motivational speak for everyone that is.
Oh yeah, your intro. We didn't do the intro because of my name.
Yeah,
Let's do that.
Good, all good. Yeah, my intro was your wrong name, so. No, so I'm based in Austria. You might hear this from my accent, and I'm super passionate about typography. So this is the topic most near and dear to my heart. I started graphic design 20 years ago, and I always loved user interface design and all that stuff. And I got connected with my passion for typography at design school from a Venetian typography teacher. Best guy ever. And this passion for the eye for details and the impact these details have, that still fascinates me. Mm-hmm. And in today's world where we have so many digital products, we use so much stuff on our screen, and most stuff is based on text, obviously.
Right.
And it's often neglected brutally. And that breaks my heart, and it also weakens the messages of the people creating the apps, and it also weakens usability, accessibility. There are so many things.
100%.
There are so many impacts. And in a design system, and you know this, Donny, of course, a tiny flaw isn't a problem, but it becomes a big problem if it's spread across your whole system.
Correct.
And then you have it everywhere, and it sabotages your message, your connection everywhere. And this is why I'm so passionate about this. And that the thing is why I'm super interested always in technical solutions. I'm not a front-end developer. I'm interested in that. I know a few things, but I'm near at a level that would be professional. Just understand stuff. I don't understand the stuff you did.
You know what, though? Neither do I. All right? I don't.
That's good. That's good.
Let me tell you, the thing we're about to talk about, I only half understand as well. So this is going to be great today.
But it worked out in a way.
Yeah.
So, but the meaning behind these things, that's important to me. And also knowing how to implement things, or that there are ways to implement these things easily in a way that is also maintainable, that's interesting to me. So that's also why I reached out to you. And yeah, speaking of that, I also have my own YouTube channel where I rant a lot about fonts and typography and edutain, so to say. And that's Pimp My Type. You can find it right here, but don't go there yet.
Not
Just
yet.
watch us talk before.
No.
Yeah,
we'll stick around here for a little bit while, certainly. But absolutely, I mean, we'll have Oliver plug some stuff at the end for sure. Oliver, of course, as he's mentioned, just really into typography from a long time, and the little details, which is definitely kin to my heart as well, because there are little details in the things that we do in design and design systems that you only really get out of experience, right? You can't really just look at something or blog post or documentation and go, okay, yes, that's the way that it's supposed to be done. You really have to kind of dig into some of this stuff, and that's, it's the world of AI. Now we're having things done for us, and people are thinking about things less. So it's so critical to have people out there like Oliver who are sweating the details and communicating the details, right? So I think we have the intro locked in now.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So right. So let's talk about this dynamic type stuff that we're going to be introducing here. So in particular, the thing that we connected on was this idea where the let me see if I get this right. The measure, which is the line length, right? This would potentially affect the distance between the lines of text, right? So basically, with I think it was with longer lines, you need more line height or leading. Is that correct, right?
Yeah.
So what the code I wrote was doing was measuring the line length and then using that number to then create the leading or the line height. And the thing that was kind of so difficult to achieve is figuring out what the measure is, because we traditionally have never been able to measure something in CSS. You would always have to go ahead and do some JavaScript and then go ahead and figure out the pixel, target the element, figure out the pixel value, and then once I get the pixel value, I could send it back into CSS and do something, right? But luckily, there was a post by, I think it was Timani over on Front End Masters, who actually has an outline of how you get the dimensions of a box using just CSS. There's this very weird, and this is the thing I was talking about earlier, I barely know how that actually works. There's some scroll timeline, view timeline stuff that's in there with some animation stuff. I have no clue what's going on in there. But it does produce the measure effectively for whatever's in there. So I could grab that number, throw it into a line function and call it a day. So Oliver saw this and had some feedback. So I actually don't even know what the feedback is yet. So this is new. This is going to be learning it for me right now. So Oliver, tell me what your feedback was for this.
So it wasn't bad. It wasn't a bad feedback. It wasn't specifically about that one feature. It was more or less about the typesetting of your blog at overall.
Oh, just overall. Okay, we're just gonna beat up my blog. Perfect. I love this.
Yeah, but I really found this very interesting as a possibility, because let's circle back a bit to the dynamic font size and why it makes sense at all to do this. Because I would love to explain a bit why it makes sense to do it at all. We can do anything, but should we do it? That's always the question.
Of course.
And and the thing is that the handy or the most beautiful CSS function, I think, in the typographer's world is clamp. So you have a minimum, you have a maximum, you have something in between. So, and this is the holy grail for all these typographers, to get fluid type size. So you can go from a minimum to a maximum and make it fluid in between. And in terms of responsive web design, this is obviously a great approach. And why is this a great approach? Why do I need larger type size at all? Or why do I need to change my type size at all? Well, the thing is that size really, really matters. When it comes to the things that affect the usability of your text the most, then it is next, the font choice isn't that important. So a lot of people say it's the font choice, and I'm spending so much time on choosing brilliant fonts, and I love that part. However, often you cannot change these. They are already they were already picked for you, like from an agency or something, yeah. And you have to work with the things you got. And when it comes now to the sizes, this is critical, because even if you have the best typeface in the world and you set it too small, it will not work, because people won't be able to read it. You have to get it to a critical minimum size. And for our digital designs, this would translate into 14 pixels on a phone for functional text, UI text, minimum. So going up from there is always a good idea, because I just assume the larger my browser window is, or my viewport is, I just assume the further it's away from the reader, from the viewer. Of course, we could be wrong, but that's the thing we got. We can measure the viewport. That's the thing we know. But and that's because we just assume if we have a viewport of, let's say, 1200 pixels, it might be a laptop computer. It might be. And if we have something like 1920, it might be a large office monitor or something. And something even larger, than it might be a TV or so. So this is an assumption. And for that, the further I'm away, the larger the text has to be easy to read. So, and that's the reason why we need this fluid type size thing. And we can do that with Clamp. That's easy. That's great. However,
I just want to butt in just a little bit, just to hammer it home, and a little bit, because I'm thinking about this on the design systems angle, and that 14 pixel or point, or would you say it's point and pixel similar, or is it? I mean, I guess it's a little bit different, right? Because they are different units.
It's a little bit different. Yeah, the points are 1.3 times. A pixel is 1.3 times. 1 point is 1.3 pixels.
Okay, it's close, but not exactly. That makes sense. I actually never. Thank you for that. But when you have it at 14 pixels as your absolute minimum, that's, I think, really great when you are actually creating your scale and creating the design tokens that you're going to be using, because then you can go ahead and say that you can't go lower than this particular token. If you go ahead and try to go lower than this token, immediately inaccessible, right? So when you have a set where you go ahead and say, okay, here are your tokens, and you have, you go from extra small to medium, and extra small sits at 14, there will never be a 2XS, right? Because it'll never be smaller than what you set there at the 14. So I think that's really key for people who are setting up typography scales to say, look, that 14, don't make anything lower than 14. So I just wanted to make sure that the connection for the design systems folks out there for where that sits. So continue, go ahead.
So don't go lower than 14 pixels, but it depends. I just gotta say this depends a lot on the typeface you're using, because there are typefaces that seem to be smaller at 14 pixels than others that seem to be larger at 14 pixels, because the thing that really affects the perception of a typeface is the X height, which is the height of the lowercase letters in relationship to the uppercase letters. For example, a typeface like Roboto has, I think, a ratio of, is it something around 78% of the cap height is the lowercase height. And that's fairly large. And then when you go to something like Gill Sans, if you know that one, or Josephine Sans, we are around like 50 or 60% or 55. It's perceived so much smaller because, of course, you have more text written in mixed case or lowercase letters, and that's an important factor as well. So the minimum depends a lot on the typeface itself. And this day, I actually sent out a newsletter which was about font sizes.
Oh, awesome!
And it was about and it was about my wife, and it was about why size does not matter to her. That
Oh,
was also the subject line.
okay.
It
Now
didn't
we're.
end up in spam. It came from Pimp My Type.
Oh
And
my
it said,
God.
it didn't end up in spam, obviously. Some people still click it.
Goes right to my inbox immediately. Well, that's it's really funny that you mentioned that, because the whole reason why I went into the measure and the line height situation was because my wife, who's also a designer, right, was telling me that the line height and the measure had a relationship, and I'm like, I've never heard that before. And the reason I say that is specifically because doing this stuff on the web, like when I was doing typography, it's only ever been on the web. I never did any print typography,
Sure.
right? So it's only ever been web typography, and the best practice that I've ever known was unitless line height, something around 1.5 for the body, and make it tighter for headings, and that's basically it, done. So I never really heard of anything about the line height being by the measure of the lines, and that I would assume that's probably because we never really had an opportunity to try to measure that. Right? It's only
Yeah.
very highly curated topographers that are probably potentially doing that, and they're not really necessarily
Yeah.
communicating that to the larger web. So I think it's really
Yeah.
interesting about our wives kind of like kind of inspiring us in this particular way of sharing some things. So thank you to your
Yeah.
wife
Yeah.
for the sizing matters, of course, or doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Goodness
it
gracious.
matters a lot, actually, because the thing is, she isn't a designer; she's a pediatrician,
Mm.
and she was training, or she's still training for a first half marathon, and she's using Adidas Running, the app. So she's tracking and doing her training with this app, and the type size there is 12 pixels,
Oh my
and
God.
it's ridiculously small. And I don't get it. I
Yeah.
don't get it. I really don't get it. And because she's got some intervals in there, and you gotta run fast for 3 minutes and slower for 5 minutes. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the size is so small, and I looked at this and said, "Come on, how can you ever do something with this?" And she was like, "I don't know, I just do what it tells me." And she's just pushing through like a good doctor and a good runner does, and I'm just complaining like any typographer, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. Now, actually, I have a question about this in particular when we're talking about font sizes, because one of the things that I think
Yes.
about and been thinking about very deeply recently is this idea of personalization. Right. So very often when a designer is designing an interface, they've picked the type sizes and they, start composing the experience. They're thinking about it in those particular sizes. But the reality, I think, is that many people are adjusting the font size on their device, right? So tell me about how you consider that when you're doing compositions and the personalization factor for font size and typography.
Yes, that's a great one. Because the thing is, we definitely we have a starting point, and the starting point should be our minimum size, which would be, let's say, 14 pixels for functional text. Again, this is not fluent reading text, this is not the body copy. If you have a blog or something like that, you don't want that to be 14 pixels small. You want this to be 1 rem or 16 pixels or something like that, at least. And on your desktop device, 24 pixels even, or something like that. So that's really, there's some room in there.
Right.
And when it comes now to the size itself, of course, this is relative. It always depends on the settings of the device, of the operating system, of the browser, whatever. And you have to make this flexible in a way, like using RAMs or AMPs. RAMs obviously is easier to use, just as a dynamic system. And in that sense, your hierarchy is depending on each other. So you definitely want to think about, all these major third and all these font scale stuff. I don't like it so much because the jumps become very high, and it's just another system to give you some numbers, and if it looks good, it looks good. That's just, again, it should help you. It shouldn't cripple you in a way.
So pause for a second there. I just want to make sure that the audience understands what we're hearing here, because it is so prevalent in the design systems community to use some sort of exponential scale for typography. And I want people to listen to what Oliver said here. is that his preference in particular about not having that exponential scale, right? And I think I align with that in particular because it all depends on the font face, basically, right? The thing that you choose, right, about the way that it's going to look as it increases, because it could look totally different between. You can't have the same scale between font families, right? It doesn't make really
Yeah.
that much sense, right? So to be able to curate it properly, I think it makes a lot more sense than you just saying, here's my major second or major fourth scale of typography,
Yeah.
and because it's mathematical, it'll clearly work. That's not the case. I think that we
Yeah.
just want to debunk
Yeah.
that really nicely here. So thanks for bringing that up, Oliver.
Yeah. Yeah. Eventually, you gotta judge it by looking at it, and to really judge it and to know what these effects are, you have to have the experience, of course, and also be familiar with the topic. And for beginners, it can be helpful because you have something to cling on to. You have at least something that you're doing right. And I just remember back then, I really thought, okay, I need to use this major third or minor third or whatever, what have you. And then it always looked wrong after a certain point. It looked too big and then too small, and it never really worked out. So I adjusted these things. And coming back to the relative sizing, if you're not doing fluid typography, why? You don't have to do this, obviously. You can do it, but you can also make jumps in between. We don't know the viewport size, and of course it might have a benefit for all the sizes in between or for all the devices in between, possibly. We don't know so much. And we also don't know so much if something that has a viewport of 820 pixels is much closer to your body or further away than something with 620. And these are just minor differences. And if it's easy to implement, do it. If it's hard to implement, just make it solid sizes with jumps in between. But what I wanted to say, what I think is really key and helping a lot is after a certain viewport width, you just can bump up your HTML element and just say, scale it up to 110%, to 120, 130, whatever, and scale everything. Just be sure that you're using your spacings are also relative to that, because that is important. Your margins, your paddings, all these things should also adapt with the font size. So this also makes the font size in a design system a crucial part. I don't know, how do you do this, Donny? It's like, to me, the font size is like also a fundamental part of the spacing overall in the design system.
So that's interesting you bring that up, because I actually differ and disagree with that. Okay, so this is this is going to be great for us now, because I've been waiting for disagreement on this show. God damn it!
Finally, we have it. Yeah. Let's go there.
So the interesting thing from my perspective, when we're talking about font size and and spacing, is, and this has been I think the general consensus in the industry is that you would typically use rem for spacing because it is related to font size. Exactly what you're saying, right? Now, the reason why I say to not use it, the font size for spacing, is specifically because when the user starts zooming things so that they can go ahead and read stuff in terms of like you're increasing the font because it's for legibility purposes. If you increase the font, that means if it's related to spacing, you're also increasing the spacing. And that's probably not what the user wants, because then what's happening is the font's getting bigger, but also the space around stuff's getting bigger. So now the person has to scroll to potentially see stuff that was already just tightly there, right? So for my perspective, what I believe is to actually go back to the old school pixels for spacing personally, such that when you increase the font size in your browser from a personal setting, that's increasing the legibility for that user, the readability, but it's not doing anything to the relationships between elements. So those relationships are the same. They're not proportional to the text, but they're still the same. So it's the same 16 pixels and 8 pixels and 32 pixels that's determining what things are supposed to be related and not related. But the space isn't increasing as well, because that's not what the user was expecting when they're increasing their font size, right? The font size for legibility specifically, not for composition of the entire page. That's from what my angle of how I think about it.
Okay, yeah. So I just think I can understand that, and it just depends on what you want. When it
Sure.
comes from when you want your whole layout to react to the scaling of the font size, then it makes sense to use RAMs.
Right.
If you don't want that, if you just really want to single out the size of the type, it makes sense to use pixels. To me, it feels like it might feel a bit cramped in there then, because I'm always balancing the padding of buttons and other elements and the spacing between certain columns and stuff based on line height, and which is then again based on the font size.
Right.
So to me, this kind of closely connects. But I can also see a way that this makes sense if you really want to single out the size of the text.
Yeah. I think this is the balance that we're talking about here, because especially when it comes to typography, there is a artistic curation that's happening for sure, right? And it's so deeply tied to print, honestly. I mean, typography and print has been is where it came from effectively. And when you have print, whatever you print is exactly how it is. It's just there it is, right? But in the web, because you have this influence of the user and being able to potentially adjust things, that artistic sense gets adjusted because of user preference. And admittedly, what we're trying to do, at least in product design, right, is to make sure that the user is going to be able to achieve their goal. And granted, yes, we want that to be looking beautiful as they do that, but ultimately, foundationally, we need it to be readable and legible. And I, like I said, I believe that paying attention to that, whether you choose rem or pixel, I think is most important, right? As long as you recognize that, you know, the audience that you're using is supposed to be using your app. If this audience does not have a problem with their vision, you know, they're young and spry and have no, you know, all that mobility stuff, great. Go ahead and make it nice and you know, well thought out with the topography and the design. But if you're having to, you know, have a larger audience and encompass, you know, older folks and other people who have, you know, other disabilities, that's when you really have to take care of the decisions that you make as a designer overall. So that's the way that I think about it, is thinking about every those small details, like we said earlier, you know, what those details are.
Yeah, but next to that, that's true with the audience. But there's also a part that's often neglected, and that is that it depends a lot on the situation where somebody's using your product. It's like
100%.
this. I'm sure you're familiar with this situational disability.
Definitely.
In a way, because like you're outside in bright sunlight and you have 1% battery life on your phone, and then it's really critical that you have sufficient color contrast in a way.
100%.
And it's not just because you aren't able to see things or you'd have a very high contrast sensitivity or low contrast sensitivity in that sense. And the thing is that really with sufficient size and sufficient contrast, you make your product more robust and durable, and also more people can more easily use it. And that's the thing. When you have these settings, these accessibility settings that you can then activate, a lot of people say, well, you can increase contrast. And there's a possibility also with app design where we can then adjust it to higher contrast. The thing is that many people do not know about these settings, and they don't identify themselves as needing to switch something on that they can read this now. So, and that's you're just adding an other version to maintain, and you're adding more work for yourself, and you're also hiding it. So why don't you just make it more accessible and easier to read in the first place? That's the whole question.
No, well said for sure. Making it easier to right out the jump street is definitely the right play. I mean, hey, Apple, are you listening? Apple, please.
Yes.
Apple, please. Could you do it? Could you do it right? God, goodness gracious, my God.
I'm derailing this conversation now because this is something I'm so passionate about. I made a video about this, and it is the liquid glass stuff. It's just
Yes.
like the worst idea ever.
It is.
It is from its concept or from its idea at all. Like the problem isn't, again, Apple uses SF Pro. It's a brilliant typeface. It's a variable font. It has a lot of different styles, weights. It's very well crafted. The sizing, everything's done so well. However, if you put this brilliant typeface on a noisy unicorn background on a glass surface at 50% opacity, something like that, no one will be able to read it.
Right.
And just because of style. And that's the issue I'm having there. It looks gorgeous. You want to lick it, but you can't read it. You just can't lick it.
Oh my God. I'm going to have to make a t-shirt. I'm sorry. It's going to, we're going to have to, you just want to lick it. Oliver 2026. My God. Okay. I mean, in some ways, I do want to lick it. I just want to just eat it and get it gone, and just want to poop it out effectively. God, I'm just awful.
Yeah, liquid ass.
Yeah, liquid ass. That's right. I remember that now. That's true. That's true. All right, let's bring this back. We were talking about the the personalization for fonts and obviously accessibility there. So now let's go into the opposite direction of like, all right, now we're going to go ahead and really dial in these dynamic fonts. We talked a little bit about the clamp, obviously, and you were mentioning about how important that is for a typographer on the web. Would you clamp everything, or there are only certain things you would clamp? And then how do you determine what the right clamp values are supposed to be?
Yeah, that's a good one. Because when it comes to font size, again, we start from a minimum. If it's your body text, I would say 16 pixels, 1 rem is the minimum for your long reading text. For UI components, it could be slightly smaller. The reason is that you don't want to have such long buttons. If you think about internationalization, I'm speaking German. We have the longest words. So something like that's cancel is like abbrechen. It's just like much longer already. Yeah. You have a lot of text in there to fit, and English is always the easiest language to use. So making it slightly smaller for this functional text is a good approach. And then for your headings, you also need to make them not as large in relationship to your body text on mobile, because then you end up with a lot of place to scroll. They eat up so much space. And again, you have long words in German. If you don't use any hyphenation or stuff, it's horrible, yeah? And on your phones. So you really need to make the font size in relationship to the body size smaller on your smaller viewports, and then you can increase the difference between headings and body text on larger screens as well. So different scales there, or different behaviors. And I also would think about not really having to change the sizes for your functional text always, because there might only be in buttons and some menu items and not all over the page. So maybe it will work out with just one size.
Right.
One size might be an easy approach there. And the thing that I'm mostly thinking about is the body text. If you have a journal, if you have a page with long reading.
Yeah. I align with much of that from my perspective, for sure. I mean, from the design system perspective, I don't want to curate lots of different types of text. I want to have, the one kind of text. So usually what I recommend is leave the body alone, even the functional, leave it alone. The only one that I think you need to start clamping and thinking about is definitely headlines, right? Headlines and titles that need to, exactly what you were saying. Now, the thing that I keep seeing on the internet is this, like, the clamp and the heading, but no one really talks about what you're looking at when trying to figure out these values. that was the thing that I was always paying attention to. It was like, it was very clear that, okay, it's one rem for body, that's fine. Maybe some detailed text is sitting at about 14 or 15, something like a little bit lower. But for the headlines, you had this very wild, wild west of, whatever you feel like, which is exactly what, what you said earlier. It could be whatever you feel like, whatever that is.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I felt like there could have been more to the decisions that a particular person might want to make when they're trying to clamp some text. Now, I don't know if you read this in the blog, because I have a blog about this in particular. But what are your
Yeah.
initial thoughts on that? About what
I
the
haven't read
values
the
are
one
supposed
on
to be?
clamping.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the question is, why do we need larger headings at all? So that's the starting. So it's why larger text? And the reason for that is visual hierarchy.
Yeah.
You want to establish a certain hierarchy on your page, and you can do this with various things. So one thing could be using a different typeface. Another thing could be using a larger type size and a different typeface, then you double down on that. And you could also change the spacing, more spacing before or after a heading, to make it easier to see that there's something new beginning. This belongs to the next section. So this is about establishing a visual hierarchy. And now going back to the question, why do we need a visual hierarchy at all? So there, the thing is, typography guides your users through the page. Nobody ever reads everything, never. Period. That's the reason why we need some visual hierarchy, to empower and enable our visitors to skim read, to find the information they're looking for quickly. And that's the usability aspect of it. So establishing this visual hierarchy is key to making your website easy to use and navigate, also your app. And one of these tools then can be by changing the sizes of your elements. And what values do you look for then? The question here is, at which level is this element at? Is it the most prominent part of the page? Is it the medium prominence, or is it not prominent at all? Is it just a caption or something like that? Some marginalia, something that's not essential, but it should still be there. When I know that, I can judge it. I can look at it and think, okay, what's my base size, my body text now? Is it more important than my body text or not? Is it still more important on mobile? And that's the question, because I want to make it large as I can, but not too large, because I don't want to take up too much space. And there is the part where I cannot really say it should be an exact value, but often it's just a rule of thumb, okay? When I'm approaching this, nobody ever, I'm sure your design system has this, I guess. Everything's going from display 1 to display 6, and then from heading 1 to heading 6 or something like that. And again, why do we need so many tokens?
Yeah,
why do we need so many sizes?
Oh my God, yeah. Same girl, same. That's as we say here in the U.S.
Yeah.
So like I see this in places, right? I even
Yeah.
my wife who works in design systems also, and she has all this, and she was actually going through a typography exercise, and she has, I think, display type, I think she has title and subtitle, and then body. I think she has those, and I'm just like, why do you need all of these? And she's like, I don't know, do we just need them? I'm like, okay, because the thing from my perspective is when I'm kind of trying to categorize this stuff, I basically say no. There's three kinds of text. There's your heading, your body, your detail. You're done. That's it. There's just three, right? And the heading can be three sizes. You got your effectively what would be your H1, you have your H2, and maybe you have an H3 somewhere, right? For body and detail, there are no sizes. It's body and detail, right? That's what I usually set it as, right? So that keeps the Hicks law really low. We're basically saying there's a lot less to choose from, right? Because you can only choose these couple of things. In the system that I personally curate, the way that it works ends up being like by priority. It's exactly the same thing that I think you were saying about this visual hierarchy. You're trying to introduce a concept, then the next thing is your body, and then if you need any additional more information, there's your detail right there on typically on the bottom, right? Or you could do it the other way where you have like the eyebrow or the overline, whatever it's on top.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but ultimately,
Eyebrow.
that's
I love the term.
yeah. But that's basically the lockup that I'm always thinking about is just heading
Yeah,
body
yeah,
detail, and that's it. And I took that from Adobe's ecosystem. They have heading body detail,
yeah,
and they also include code because there's a code thing in there. But I usually leave that alone personally.
yeah,
But
yeah,
talking about the clamp thing, what I wrote about this was again thinking deeply of what I'm thinking about for the clamp. So one of the things about this thing was thinking about the optimal number of characters in the body. So
yeah,
I've heard anywhere between 40 to 80 characters. So I usually go right in the middle and I go 60, right? Again, that's all going to depend on font sizes and font families and things like that. But
language.
I just hit right. Oh, language, right? Exactly. Well said. But I usually just hit 60 characters, just make it as like a little baseline for me, generally speaking. Then I'm like, okay, well, the headline and the body, when I'm locking those up, those I think should be locked up nicely together, right? So that the heading matches up with the body, however the font size is what that is for desktop or whatever. I'm locking that up very nicely. Okay, perfect. Then on the mobile side of things, right? Now we're squishing everything. That's what we're kind of, I guess, doing on mobile. But you're squishing everything, and I'm thinking to myself, well, what's the smallest squish that we really need to care about? And looking at lots of data and even what is it sizes and things of that nature. It looks like 320 pixels is the minimum squish that we have to deal with. Anything smaller than that is probably a little bit of an outlier, generally speaking. So we look at 320. So what that looked like to me was that we have these thresholds effectively. We have effectively 60 RCH, and for those at home that aren't familiar with that, RCH stands for root character size. So it's effectively the size of the number 0 in your font. Mileage may vary, but that is going to represent your body size. So basically the 60 characters. I'm going to say that that's my max width on my heading. Okay. Then I'm going to say my minimum width on the heading is 320, right? So in between that, what I end up doing is I basically have that heading and its lockup and the way that it wraps actually scale down and maintain itself at between the 60 RCH to the 320, such that you can see that kind of lines up with the body the whole way as it goes down. And that's the way that I think about the clamping function personally, so that you have that composition as it comes down. Now, how many people are resizing their browser and paying attention to that? Smallest percentages of it, right? But that's coming from a systems perspective. That's the way that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
Anything that sticks out to you in that way of thinking at all?
Yeah, it makes total sense to, in a way, bind this towards the characters in one line, which is the measure again.
Mm-hmm.
So how many characters do we have in one line? And that's also why do we come up with these 40 to 80 characters? That's the big question.
Yeah, sure.
And the reason for that is it's just what we are used to. That is the default width of many books, novels, things that we circling back to print, that we are familiar with, and we read best what we are most familiar with. Of course, we can say now who's familiar with reading a book nowadays, but still, it is something what we want there, and also the reason for adjusting the line height or measure, leading. And I appreciate that you didn't say leading. Some people do that.
It took me a long time to not do that. I'll have to say, honestly,
Yeah,
I've been practicing.
because they use strips of lead and put them in between the lines of text, and that's where it comes from. So when we have longer lines, as you're coming back to the conversation with your wife, we have longer lines, we need more line height. Why? Because we want to guarantee a comfortable reading experience. If you ever lose your lines, it is because the letter space, the spacing between lines is too tight, and you kind of lose orientation. And your eye has to travel a far distance from the end of one line to the beginning of the next, if you have a longer line. If you have a shorter line, you have to just move a few words and not 10 or 12 or 15 words, depending on language again. And this will make it easier. If your writing style, for example, uses a lot of paragraph breaks in between, or you have just 3 lines per paragraph or something, you don't need to care so much about line height, because you will not lose your lines there. But if you have more text in one line, then you definitely need to increase that one. When it comes to your headings, you said again, it doesn't really count so much for the headings, because they are not very long. You want them to be very compact. I'm very happy that you mentioned that they have their distinct line height. This is the biggest issue when I'm doing type audits for design systems. This is the biggest issue I'm finding. It's like that you have headings have a line height of 1.3 or 1.5 or something like that. And then, because they just don't think about making them as compact as possible. Because when they break, you really want them to stick together. You do not want them to be all over your page.
Right.
And they break on mobile. And that's something that's not as relevant to headings, because they're usually very short. But when it comes to your body text, definitely, I think that's a good approach, coming with the characters. And I would love to add there, you definitely need a max width. You need to lock your text column at 60 characters or 70 characters, depending on the language and the typeface again.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, that's good. I'm glad I'm on the right track there. I want to talk about internationalization a little bit, because you were talking about the German being long and English being generally shorter. One of the things that came up in the design systems community, there's a person in the community named Mike Mai, who is Chinese and also into typography. And I think he actually you spoke with him on maybe a show or something.
Mike as a guest. Yeah, he's also super into accessibility. He's a great guy.
Yeah. So one of the things he loves to bring up is that the Chinese characters, when you represent a idea or word or symbol or whatever, those are always small. So you'll get potentially just 1 or 2 characters for what you thought might have been several characters. So you're not just, trying, and granted, like, yes, the thing that usually breaks it is a German word or a Turkish word, something of that nature that just is huge. The big example I like to actually have is the word "by now" in Mongolian is 20 characters long. So, when you want to just buy now, it's just like boom, it's like this huge button. So, but it's really interesting thinking about it from the opposite angle, where now you are thinking about, well, hold on a second, it's only a few characters. How does that look? And how does because the way that you set that type for those particular CJK characters is also definitely different than what you would normally do for any kind of Roman alphabet or otherwise, right? So even that kind of localization effort is significant. Now, granted, I mean, if you have the cycles to do that, I think more power to you to manage that kind of font. I'm thinking of what is it? Noto, right? Noto Sans basically has the whole thing. But are there any other kind of like gotchas when it comes to the localization kind of efforts that you can think of?
Yeah, sure. There's a lot of times we have an issue. I have an umlaut, which is an O with 2 dots on the top. This is like diacritics is often a part that are missed. So there are so many fonts out there that just cover the basic English alphabet and miss so much on European languages, which is horrible, because then it gets replaced by the default font of your browser. And if you didn't change your font stack to, let's say you have a sans serif web font, and you didn't change your font stack from that web font then to sans serif in that order, you end up with very obvious characters in between that do not really fit to the others. So this is often a common issue. So I always encourage people to check for which languages or regions they want to use this. And not just if you're saying, okay, I'm just using it in English. If you're having a person with a name from Turkey or from just with one special diacritic, it could only be Spanish or French with an enya or with a tilde or on top or something like that, and or an accent, and yeah. You're making life harder. So always think about that one. Latin extended is the minimum you should use as a character set. Luckily, all the typefaces on Google Fonts, all these fonts, they cover that at least.
Yeah, that's
so
great.
that's one standard they have. Yeah.
Actually, I mean, speaking about Google Fonts, do you? I mean, this is probably a layup for you. Do you have a favorite Google font right now?
Oh, you're horrible. That's like, do you have a favorite CSS function? It's like,
I don't even know if I do, but I would have to think about it.
No, it depends on for what job. And the thing is, and this is something I cannot make up my mind. And I love the part of picking fonts. I love to dissect them, to think how they are used best, because often they are best for one job: headlines, body text, or details, as you said, the more functional text, as I say. So these three jobs have to be done. Some type families can cover everything, but a few or most of them just are good for one job. And I cannot make up my mind, and that's the reason why I started a newsletter 5 years ago, something like that, and I'm almost at reviewing 200 fonts. So I reviewed weekly, now I'm bi-weekly, every Font Friday. So just go to fontfriday.com, there you can sign up for a newsletter, and then you get a font recommendation. And I'm alternating between free fonts and paid fonts, and a lot of Google fonts are on there. Google fonts are great, because they are very easy to access. You shouldn't host them via Google Fonts. I'm sure you are familiar with that. But you should definitely browse them and have the knowledge to assess if they are working for this or that job. There are some old fonts that are not working as well nowadays, but they also updated so many of these. Using the variable fonts there is also key, and gives you so much possibilities and power. So really encourage people to check things out there. The downside of using a Google font is that if you're using, let's say, Merriweather, like you do on your blog, a lot of people already have used it, and it's not very distinct, but you can still combine it interestingly. And I really love the way how you show your headings, your illustrations. So this kind of evens out that for body text, you might use something that's very popular or very common, and which also kind of brings me to the one thing I wanted to give you feedback on before we forget and we run out of time.
Yes, let's do that.
Yeah. The thing is, I know your name's on, what was it, on CodePen? It's Faux, what was it?
Faux Serious.
Faux Serious, yes. It kind of fits your name because you have a faux italic on your blog.
Yes, I do. That's correct. Yes, you got me.
I got you. I got you. And that's just, in some fonts, it doesn't stand out as much. And only people like me are insulted by it. Yeah?
I understand. I understand.
That sense, Merriweather has a very, very different italic, because for serif fonts, when you have an italic, that's an interesting historical fact. The upright, the Roman, and the italic, they were two different alphabets, and they were not interchanged until quite recently in typography terms, like I think 150 years or something. We did not mix italic and Roman. They were two different scripts, so to say. And to have an italic script is like they have different styles. You don't usually have a double story A. You don't usually have a double story G. It turns into a single story A, single story G. It's also narrower. It's more vivid in a way. And because it was from fast handwriting, that was the style based on. And when it comes to Merriweather, which is based on these kind of traditional serif fonts, it is a very different italic. And I can share you a screenshot. I just fiddled something in there that it worked. And later, if you want to, and you can share it then, just as a comparison. And you will definitely see the difference then.
I already know what you're talking about, because I will say it has bothered me too. To be clear, but the thing for me, of course, is, as many people know, is that I'm working on so many projects at any point in time that sometimes the sweating the details. Well, sometimes I have other details that I'm sweating at the time, right? So for you pointing it out now, I will absolutely spend this weekend to find something a little bit more appropriate for the blog. So I really do appreciate you calling me out on that, and I'll definitely take a peek at the at your recommendation. But we are closing toward the end of the show here, so I know you plugged a couple of things, but let's just get it all. What's everything that we need to know about Oliver and Pimp My Type?
So first thing is just go to pimpmytype.com. There you can find my YouTube channel, my newsletter. Also, I'm also giving quick type checks if you're wondering if your design system, if you're just changing fonts. That's always the part. You don't want to build your design system on an inappropriate type choice, because everything will shift. You know this, Don. You know it. Swapping out fonts later is hell of a lot of work. That's why we have all these cumbersome tokens for everything that we can kind of compensate for changing fonts afterwards. But yeah, it's such a big job. And if you're just after redesign, often marketing agencies or design agencies, they propose the new font, then you try it out in your design system, and then you feel like something doesn't look right, something doesn't feel right. We use the styles they proposed, and I'm happy to help there, to have another eye, a pair of eyes, and give you my advice there. So that's definitely something you can do. And if that's not important right now, or if you're not in the situation, there is a webinar coming up, which is on March 24th, where I will tell more about the things, the killers that lie in your website's typography, that kill UX. So what are the killers? What are the killers? Where are they? So we will talk about the 4 balancing stones of good typography, and just raise some awareness what negative impacts bad typography can have, and how to avoid these impacts by thinking about sizes, as we discussed, also spacing, also about contrast and font choice. But font choice isn't the most crucial part. It's also the one thing that you don't want to change. You want to have the solid on the first place, but then you can do so much still with that. So connect with me on LinkedIn. That's also an option. I'm on Instagram. I'm not on X anymore. And yeah.
Perfect. All right. Well, yeah, that was great. I'm going to try to put as many of those links on the description as I possibly can. But Oliver, thank you so much for being on the show today, and sharing the wisdom and knowledge of typography with us, and also for letting me know how I could fix my blog, which I will, again, absolutely do later this weekend. So now I have something else to do. I put it on my list. But it's just never ending. But that's our show. Thank you so much for watching. Before you go, just help out the show by smashing that like and subscribe button to get notified the next time that we go live. And feel free to continue the conversation on our official Design Systems Discord at discord.ds.house. Play nice in those comments, and you'll see the internet. Bye.